Good morning. Welcome to Managing Up. It's the third in a nonprofit leadership series that we're having. It was supposed to be just in January, but we got snowed out last week, so that class is going to be made up in March. But they're all live streamed, so you can watch them on the library's Facebook or YouTube channel. The first one was nonprofit boards, managing and retaining board members. And then the risk management class is the one that got rescheduled for March. This one is Managing Up. And then the last one, which is a week from today, same room, same everything, is Financial Management for Nonprofits. So that is next week. And I wanted to tell you, if you've ever been to a program here, you know to fill out those little slips in front of you and leave them in the box on that table in the back. That really does help us out with programming. I'm very happy to welcome Melanie Palmer and Hannah Lastra back today. They've done several programs with us. They both work at M. Palmer Consulting. Melanie is the owner and principal. She has over a decade of fundraising experience, and she serves as president of the Arkansas chapter of Grant Professionals Association. Hannah is a project manager at the consulting firm, and she is serving as you're a board member at Grant Professionals, right?
I'm the treasurer of the Grant Professionals Foundation.
Okay.
Started this year.
Yay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
But they are going to present this class today, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thanks, Kelly. Can y'all hear me? Okay, just a reminder, we are live streamed today, so I'm just repeating what Kelly has said. So you'll have this, you can share it with people. Don't say anything that you don't want live streamed on Facebook. It's good to see you all. Thank you for coming. My name is Melanie Palmer, and I have a fundraising consulting firm that's based in Fayetteville. We work with nonprofits of all sizes, but we really specialize in small to mid-sized nonprofits and their fundraising needs. We also do board training, we do leadership coaching, really anything that's in the fundraising realm, except that we're not going to play in your gala. Anything else, we're here for it. So thank you for coming. And I'll have Hannah introduce herself. Hand it to you.
Hello, I'm Hannah Lastra. I've been working with Melanie Palmer for 3 years, and I've been in the fundraising field for 3 years. Before that, I was a musician, so I got my bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Arkansas. I'm a vocalist and also a music historian. So I see how my love of research and music has translated into the nonprofit field. About myself, I am currently a project manager for M. Palmer Consulting, so I've slowly made it up the ladder, but I'm still not at the top. But I have a lot to say about managing up because I've always been the person at the bottom. And I currently serve as the treasurer for the Grant Professionals Foundation. We are a national board that basically provides all the scholarships for the Grant Professional Association. And then I also am the president now of the Grant Professionals Association Arkansas chapter. So Melanie was as of last year, and I am now this year. So if you have any interest of joining us with the Grant Professionals Association, please talk to me. You do not have to feel like a grant pro to be a part of it. We love people who want to just learn about grants to join. We're the place to go if you want to learn about grants. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about the strengths and our not so great stuff in a minute. So I'll go back.
Thanks, Hannah. So we wanted to talk about managing up and leading up because we work with about 20 organizations a year, and we see that this is like one of the main challenges, right? For people of really all levels. So entry-level program folks, development directors, executive directors leading up to your board. Sometimes we work with board members who are trying to lead up to their chair or their executive committee on the board. So unless you're the board chair, we see this a lot kind of on all levels. And so I think it's it's a skill that you can easily develop, but you have to be, I think, strategic about it. Do you want to go to my slide? Go back a couple. I started my career in fundraising, and I was a development director, I was an executive director, I've been a board member on a number of boards. So I also care about this issue because I've been in a position to have to navigate that at every level, which is a little bit different at every level, but has some commonalities. And I like to talk a little bit about the things that are challenging for me, because I think that's the place to start, right? If you're looking at a relationship you have with someone that you're wanting to lead up to, I think it always has to start with you, right? What are your pain points at work? How does the way that you manage conflict or manage difficult conversations, like how does that come into play in the way that you're going to approach this? And so I think, looking in the mirror is the first step. So for me, really on all of these roles, I can be a roadblock because things, I'm not good at details a lot of times that have to like flow through me, right? So when I was a development director and an executive director, I kind of like viewed myself as the hourglass, right? Like I was that point in the middle where everything had to flow through, and I was slow a lot of times with that, which I think is something a lot of people in that position feel. I can be insensitive and preoccupied and task-focused and impatient, right? And I think anyone who has worked with me would tell you that I'm all those things. So when I look at managing up, whether that's the roles that I have been in where I have to manage up to a boss or to a board, or now managing our clients is really kind of managing up, any of those things, I have to be real conscious of this, right? To make sure that I'm coming at it from a place of self-awareness as well as a strategy for how to do this. So I would just encourage you to spend some time thinking about like what are the roadblocks that you might introduce. And everybody has them, right? So this is not a criticism of you. Everybody's got them. So just be aware of what yours are. Hannah might want to talk about hers. Do you want to talk about yours?
Of course. I'd love to talk about the things I'm bad at. So I wanted to approach, I'm going to move, wow, that is bright. Wanted to approach this a little different because I am very, because of Melanie, strengths-based. So I think how I came about my bad things is I looked at my good things and how other people might see my good strengths as bad. And I think that's a way to start, right? Because we're here to just get better. And a lot of the times our strengths lead to weaknesses for other people because that's not their strength. So for example, I am Harmony. Harmony hates conflict. I hate it. Hate it so much. I avoid it at all costs. So for me, managing up can be hard because sometimes people will not respond the way I wanted. And then I'm overly sensitive, so I put that also with Harmony, right? So for some people, they would see that as bad things, but actually, I look at my Harmony as a strength, right? Because I'm always looking for everyone to feel involved, for there to be resolution, for conflict to be fixed eventually in a kind way. But people might see me and be like, oh, she's so sensitive. I always say yes, always. It's a problem. I'm an achiever, and I'm responsible, and I'm disciplined. And all of those things make that horrible combo of always wanting to say yes. And so, again, it becomes a problem when I'm managing because I'm doing too much. It's too much. And so, of course, I'm going to forget things, or I might not say a deadline in an email. I do things like that because I'm so busy. And on top of that, I have a 2-year-old and I'm pregnant. So I always say yes. And I'm also serving on the boards in leadership positions. And then I love structure. Love it because I'm disciplined. So I want things to be focused, task-oriented. I want things to stay the same every time for every project. And that's not going to happen. So I tend to get frustrated with people when they don't like my structure because I work with a lot of people who hate structure. But those things, yes, they're bad. They make my life difficult for myself and other people, but they actually are good because they come from those things, right? I mean, if you read that list, you'd be like, oh, wow, she's awesome. And I am, right? But I'm learning how to overcome the weaknesses that come with my awesomeness.
I second that Hannah is awesome. Okay, so this is like the first work, right? You always look at yourself first. So what are you, and think about the person or people that you're wanting to manage up to. How do their strengths interact with this, right? As Hannah said, if you're leading up to someone who doesn't like structure, like Hannah has to be aware that like trying to impose as much structure as possible is not going to be the route, right? Even though that's her natural inclination. Okay. So these are some things to think about when you're doing that kind of self-evaluation. Your ego, this is number one, right? A lot of times when we're wanting to lead up and we're not being successful at that, it's either because of our ego or because of the person we're leading up's ego, or both, right? We see this a lot. And we all have an ego. Nobody does not have one. But how big is yours, and is it getting in your way? I had a boss once that told me all the time, it's, you can get anything done as long as you don't care who gets credit for it, right? So think about that. Do you need to be right all the time? I'll raise my hand that I am that person, right? That's me. Do you expect other people to be like you? So sometimes when you're wanting to lead up, sometimes that's, this person is not doing things the way I would do them, and so I want to change that, right? Well, do you really need to change that to get the outcome you want, or could they do it a different way, right? I think you have to be open to the idea that there are multiple roads to the same outcome. So think about that. And then tunnel vision. This is a problem in nonprofits where things are very siloed, right? Like, this is my job, this is your job, and there's kind of no route between the two. So if you work in that kind of environment, I think you need to think about it a little broader, right? So think about the ways that your goals overlap, and try to mine from that when you're looking to lead up. Any other thoughts about kind of major roadblocks that either you see at your organization or you have yourself, or any? No? I've covered everything. Okay, excellent. Okay, this is just my Spice Girl fix. Next slide. Okay, so no matter who you're trying to lead up to or manage up to, it starts with your relationship with that person, right, or those people. So it's very hard to lead up to someone with whom you don't have a relationship, right, or with whom your relationship is comprised entirely of you complaining about things or wanting something different, or them complaining about things. If the conflict is always what your whole relationship is, that you're always going to be unsuccessful, right? You have to have a relationship with the person that you're wanting to lead up to. And some relationships are easier than others, right? Like, there are some coworkers that you have that you are just naturally have great camaraderie with because you are interested in similar things, or you approach work the same way, or you have similar strengths, or whatever it is. Like, there are some people that you just naturally get along with. And there are other people that are just more distant from you. And that's not a fault of yours or theirs. You just may not have that kind of chemistry. And so I think you have to be a lot more deliberate about developing relationships with those people that you don't have that much in common with, maybe. So I worked with a woman, for example, she was actually my peer in our organizational structure, but she loved classic cars. Like, that was her thing. She and I had very little in common. We were both female, and we both cared about the mission, and that's pretty much it. But she loved classic cars, and that was like, I could not think of something that I care less about than classic cars. I barely care about my own car. But she did like shows every weekend. They were traveling all the time. And so, of course, on Mondays, I always made a point of asking her, what'd you do this weekend? And heard about like whatever car show she'd been to. I didn't pretend that I was into that like her, but I was interested in her, right? And that's just kind of relationships 101, right? Like, you show an interest in someone else's interest, even if it's not your own. And the fact that she knew she was going to get to chat cars to me every Monday morning. And so when I went to her and had to have some real complicated financials run, she was a lot more amenable to that, right? And that's not manipulative. It's just caring about someone else, right? You have to think about what your relationship is like. When I was on staff, I always thought, do I know the name of this person's pets? And do I know the ages of this person's kids? And if I don't, then we don't know each other well enough yet for me to ask for favors, right? And that's the thing. That's was kind of my litmus test, right? Are we close enough that I know the names of your pets or the ages of your kids, right? So something to think about. And you want to do that. You want to do that relationship building before you need their help, right? So do this. I mean, you should do this with all your coworkers, right? You should have this kind of relationship, invest in that kind of relationship. And that's hard. Like, I recognize that's hard when you're task-oriented, right? Like, you got a bajillion things to do. So talking about classic cars is something I don't care about for 15 minutes. Like, task-oriented, remember, I'm task-oriented, right? Like, I got stuff to do, and we're talking about cars I don't know anything about. But, like, that investment of time will pay dividends in the future, right? I mean, you want that kind of smooth relationship with people because that will save you time long term. After you need their help, so nobody likes being a transaction, right? Nobody likes that. Many of you are fundraisers, I'm assuming, that are here. Like, you don't treat your donors that way. Like, you don't show up and ask them for money and then never call them again, right? That's bad fundraising. Well, it's bad relationship building too in your organization. Like, you have to have that relationship before and after, right? And then also with people that you don't like. And we all work with people sometimes that we don't like. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? Sometimes people just rub us the wrong way. Not their fault, not our fault, just rub us the wrong way. And you have to do this with those people too. You have to put in the time if you want to work well. So I had a couple of young nonprofit program people come to me a couple years ago, one of our clients, and they were having a lot of trouble working with a person who was not their direct boss, but was a director level, one up from them, and they needed things from him to do their job, and from their view, he was really a roadblock. Well, so one of the things we talked about was, well, what amount of time have you put into developing this relationship? Well, none. Well, there you go, right? This person was really passionate about duck hunting. I said, talk about duck hunting for a while. And just listen, right? You don't have to pretend you're a duck hunter, just listen. And after a little bit of that, like, they start getting what they needed from him, right? You just have to invest that time. Anything else I'm forgetting about that? Do you all have any experiences with kind of that kind of relationship building? Yeah.
It's not a question. So I run a nonprofit, and our board is distributed across the country. And so the time that we have together is very limited and very often task-oriented. And so I try and dedicate, the first 5 minutes or so of every call to this relationship building. But it often feels like, okay, sorry guys, I got to cut this off because we got to get to XYZ in this next hour and a half. Do you have any strategies or recommendations for building those relationships?
Yeah, the question is, she has a busy board and tries to dedicate some time to building relationships at board meetings, but then you got stuff you got to get done, and board members want to talk and talk. Boards don't do that. I think you have to, in my experience with boards, you have to build board member relationships one by one. That's not what anybody wants to hear because it's time consuming, but you really do. Because what happens in boards is, if you ask the board, hey, what's going on? How have you all been? Right? You'll get 2 people who will talk a lot. You'll get the rest of them who won't say anything. And will start like clicking out, right? And doing their camera goes off, like when that happens, right? And I think it's just really hard to do that as a group. And you have board members. I mean, and I've been this board member too. Like, I've got an hour when my kid is at nap time. And I don't have time to go past an hour because she's going to be up screaming. Like, we have to get done whatever you need from me in this hour. So I think if you're trying to build relationships with your board, which you should if you're a director or a development director, I think that has to be done one-on-one. Yeah, I really do. When I was an executive director, for example, I had a board member who was a captain of our police department, and he was very busy. It was hard to get a hold of. And he had a rule at his station where he got 30 minutes of coffee before anybody would speak to him. Like, nobody was allowed to come, nobody's allowed to schedule anything, nobody's allowed to have a conversation until he had his 30 minutes of coffee. And I asked him, I said, what do I have to do to get permission to come in for those 30 minutes and chat with you? And he said, well, he told me what kind of breakfast food he liked. I'm like, I'm going to bring it, and I'm going to, just one day, and I'm going to come sit down for 30 minutes and crash your party. And it was great. It was the time that he was relaxed, like it was already built into his schedule. I brought him something, right, as a bribe. It worked great, right? I had another board member who always wanted to have lunch. Like, lunch was her favorite thing. And so we had lunch, all the time. I just scheduled it, like, throughout the year. Like, this is the time we're going to have lunch every other month. That was her thing, right? Some board members, I had board members who didn't want to talk to me at all, but they just wanted to text me, right? Like, they were texters. So that's easy. I just only ever texted them, right? The lunch lady would have really hated that, right? So I think you have to figure out, like, what is the thing that each board member, what's their happy time, what's their happy place, how can you fit into what they're already doing, and I think you really have to invest in that. But I will say, like, that's a lot of time, especially if I have a lot of board members. I had 16 board members, it was a lot of time, but I got so much out of them, right? Because I wasn't just coming to them when I needed something, right? That's a great question, yeah.
What if you have a texter that likes to text 24/7? No. You work 20 hours a month.
No, you just say no. That's a boundary you have to. No, that's a great question. Is it your board chair?
No.
I would talk to your board chair. Like,
They've
you
told to talk to them too, and it
Okay.
just keeps going.
You can block his number. I'm not kidding. Like, if they don't respect your boundaries and it's not work time, and that's kind of, I would say that's like borderline harassment, right?
Yeah.
If you've had that conversation and said, this is not my work time, if they're texting you late at night or early in the morning, we have clients that do that sometimes. Like, I just tell them, like, we can't text at all. because I'm going to block you. This is what I'm going to do if you won't stop. Yeah, I think that's a boundary. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Okay, so this session could be called leading up to, but I mean, just the distinction here. Management's task-oriented, project-based. Management is usually dependent on your place in the hierarchy of your organization, right? So whatever your job title is and wherever that fits in your org chart, that determines management, right? Managers are people who supervise other people, right? So you may be a manager of people. How many of you are a manager of someone? Anyone? That's your organization. Okay. How many of you are not a manager of an organization? So you're reporting up, right? So you may not have the chance to be management at your organization, but we find, and again, we work with a lot of organizations, everybody can do leadership, right? Everybody can do that no matter where you are in the organization. And we have had some fascinating examples of organizations in which really the people leading the organization were the entry-level people. Like they were the ones with the knowledge, they were the ones with the power, they were the ones with the community relationships. Now it's inequitable that they weren't getting paid for that, but my point being, if you are not a management level position, you can still lead in your organization, right? And that's what we're talking about today, is how to do that. So this is you have more power than you probably think you do for that. If you are wanting to be a leader at your organization, and if you are a management person, you may be here because you're wanting to manage it, lead up yourself to your boss, or that you're wanting to create an environment in which the people who report to you can lead up, right? I love people leading up to me because it makes me look good and it decreases my workload, right? And they have, but we have a team of 5. Like they have skills and strengths and ideas that I never would have thought of, right? I mean, it's so much, my job is so much more fun when people will be willing to lead up to me. But you want to be a servant leader, right? So first is listening. So when you're developing that relationship with this person, and if you have a rocky relationship with someone, you may need a reset, right? You may have to do a little work to reset things, and that may be an honest conversation that you have to have. But are you listening to them? I think a lot of people, we have a member of our team who is the best listener I've ever worked with. She's incredible. Like nothing is lost on her. She takes notes from our meetings, and it's like her note, like I think that 5 things have happened in this meeting, and she gives me her notes, and it's like 58 things that have happened in this meeting, and I'm like, was I asleep for part of this? Like, it's incredible. So listening is a skill. And if you are someone that is just sitting there waiting for someone else to stop talking so you can talk, like you're doing it wrong, right? Come prepared to listen first. And people will give you clues about how they want to be treated and how they want to be valued, right? They'll mention something that then you can pull from, some people will just say, like, this stresses me out, I don't like this. I had a coworker one time who, she had a infant, and so she was severely sleep deprived a lot of the time. And she told me, like, my brain just is not functional until about 10:30 in the morning, right? Even though she got there at 8. And so I knew, like, if I wanted something, from her, or if we were going to work together for something, I'm not going to talk to her before 10:30. She's told me she doesn't do that, right? So, like, those are the things that you want to kind of be learning. You want to come from it from a helping mindset. There is a big difference. And I'm speaking as someone who's been a supervisor and also someone who has been supervised. There's a big difference between someone coming to you as a supervisor and saying, hey, this is a problem and we need to fix it, and this is bothering me and you're not doing it right, and I'm done with this whole place, right? Or if I come to, alternatively, if I come and say, I've noticed that this is a stressor on our team and maybe for you too, and I had an idea of how we might fix it, and I was wondering if I could talk to you about that, right? Those are 2 very different approaches. And approach 2, I will tell you, works better than approach 1. And then service is purpose. Like I had a coworker who always used to say this, service is purpose. So always bringing it back to the mission. It may be something that you want changed at your organization or in your group of people because it's bothering you. Like it may be a personal thing, like this is bothering me and making me mad and making my job difficult. And that's fine to say that, but really, like, the more you can bring it back to the mission, the more you're going to get, right? So if you can say, I think our clients are not, there are a lot of people that aren't receiving our services because we're, doing this, this, or this, or this, and I think it would be better if we did this, 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 or this. Like, that's more appealing to someone than saying, this is stressing me out, and we need to change it, right? Even though it may be stressing you out. Just bringing it back to the mission and focusing on the mission, I think, is really helpful. And then assess your relationship with someone. Again, this is about relationships. Assume good intention. This is so important. I think when we work with someone that frustrates us in some way, or a situation that frustrates us in some way, it's so easy for us to assume that that person doesn't care about us, is not listening to us, that they don't value our ideas, that they are intending to do something, difficult. But assume good intention. And I will say, your boss always has more information than you do. And I think that's really critical, right, to know. There are pieces of this puzzle that you don't have access to. And I think that we just always have to remember that. I had an employee come to me one time who wanted to launch a transitional housing program. And she had done the work of, and it's something we talked about kind of on and off, but she had done the work of like outlining how she thought it would work, what mode of service we could do, how many clients we could serve. She had done all this work, which was wonderful. It was not something I'd assigned her to do. She just came to me with this. Like, I want to launch this right away because we have clients that are in terrible need of transitional housing and we just don't offer any. And part of her plan was that she and one of her coworkers would kind of take that on as their project. And that's really the way it would have had to work. Well, her coworker, she didn't know this, but her coworker had just been diagnosed with cancer. I was actively trying to cut down her workload, right? Like, I'm not going to put a new project on it, but she didn't want anyone to know. I couldn't just say, no, she got cancer, we can't do that. So I just had to tell her this is not the right time. And she was very frustrated with me. I can't, you're just going to have to trust me. This is not the right time. I can't, what do you do, right? So I think it's important just to keep in mind that there may be other factors that you just don't have access to. And anytime you manage personnel or finances, like, there are just some things that are confidential that have to be. That's not your boss trying to be difficult. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, this is Hannah. I'm going to turn it over to you. So we're going to talk a little bit about like some of the nuts and bolts of ideas. Like, here are some specific ideas that you can do.
So these are a mix of tips from Melanie and myself, so I may call on you if I'm like, what does this mean? So the top one, and it's at the top, and Melanie just talked about it, so I'm going to just kind of leave it at that. But assume good intention, always, and I'll have some examples where I didn't do that, and it was bad, because I tend to do that and think everything's about me when it's not. Give people plenty of time for everything and anything. So my work is a lot of task. I'm needing to get data from people to write grants or to write reports. I'm like that person that when they see my name pop up, they're like, no, I'm that person. So I have had to learn to give people plenty of time, and what I think is plenty of time is not accurate to what they think. So a lot of the conflict I have had is about that. And trying to mitigate that before it becomes a conflict. So how I do that is, if it's a new staff member, or if it's like right now is the perfect time, it's the beginning of the year, everyone's talking about changes and what can we do better, ask people in those meetings, how much time do you need? Because you may have worked for them for 10 years, and what they needed 10 years ago is different now also, right? Because I'm working with a client where they just had their whole client database completely change. So when they needed 2 weeks, now has become 3. And that is a change from like 4 months ago, right? And I wouldn't have known that unless I asked them. So again, assume that you don't know everything, and then ask. Always ask them, because they're not gonna tell you. They're just gonna be mad at you, and like, it'll always go to conflict if you don't ask them ahead of time. This is also really important. I find this to be really helpful, but it's a little weird to get used to at the beginning. We, not I language. So always tell people, I do this in emails, but I probably do it in person. I just don't think about it as much. But I always say, we're working on this. I don't say, I'm working on this. Can you send me these data requests? It's always a we, even if it's just from me, because I'm trying to remind the people that we're doing this together, right? Like, I literally cannot do this proposal or this project unless you send me the data. This is a we program. And I think, especially depending on the type of job you have, if you're like, for myself, grants is very siloed. We're kind of seen as like we're in the dark and like we never come out. People think that we always think in I. And as grants, we're actually always thinking in we. So I like to remind people that. It also makes it them have to have accountability, right? If I said we and not just I, it means them. And sometimes what I do, if it's a person that is very, very difficult to get stuff from, is I include their boss. I don't do that with everyone, but if it's a difficult person, I CC their boss all the time. All the time. Because, again, it's a we. And the boss is also part of the we. I'm not trying to like call them out or anything, but I'm also reminding the boss that you're a part of this too, even if you're not getting emails every single day from me. Position it as something that helps them. So that's kind of the service, like reminding them of the mission. So I'm not just trying to get data so I can write a proposal for your new rehousing program. I'm trying to get data to fund your new rehousing program so our neighbors have homes for free, basically. So I sometimes will just position at that, remind them what the program does. And they probably know that. Most of the time I'm asking the program person. But it also shows them that I know that. And it's not just about the money, it's about the people that we are serving all the time. Remind them that, because I think as program people, they're thinking that, but they think that everyone else isn't. Like, everything else is about the money and everything. Like, we're just like, little people, boards and stuff. But always make it about the mission, and that mission is the people you serve. It's not the program itself. It's those you serve. So I always say, how many meals did you provide to our neighbors? I don't just say, how many meals did you provide? Even in my data request, it's always about the people we are serving. Appeal to what they care about. So some people really care about it because of the program. Some people really care about it because of the people. You'll learn that as you get to know them. This is a little more like nuanced. But the biggest thing that I have learned in my job is to do things in other people's systems if they fight you on your system. So remember, I love structure. I will show you my systems. You guys are gonna probably either love me or hate me when you see my examples. Some people, though, do not like my systems. And I have had to learn to do things in their way, even though it doesn't make any sense to me. And I just have to go sigh and just go, and every time I send it, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. But you know what? It's what they want, and it's how I get the info. And that is how you manage up, right? Because I'm not in a place to say, no, we're actually going to do it my way, because they are above me. They're technically my client. I'm supposed to be in service of them. They're paying me to help them. And I found ways, though, to have people integrate their own system into mine. So I had a calendar where I was having a horrible time coordinating with our social media marketing manager. We have a lot of grants that require that we make thank you posts and stuff. And I usually would just email her and say, hey, by the way, this is coming up. Can you make sure we post a thank you? And she would act like she would never see it. And then it would come time for me to report on it, and she was like, I had no idea. And she was really mad, because of course it makes her look bad, because she didn't do her job. And of course I wanted to be like, I emailed you, like a lot. And so we had to create a new system, because clearly it wasn't working, just the emails. So I have a grants calendar, and I really angrily created a new tab, like in my thing, because it totally threw things off. And I just said, required social media things, or something like that. And I have it in there. So I still email her, but I also put it in there, right? And it's helpful because everyone sees that. Her boss can see that. Everyone else sees it too. They know I have told her. And I think she really just needed that extra accountability, because now she hasn't missed a post. Like, it hasn't been a problem. But I was grudgingly changing my system, because I was like, because to me, I'm like, why isn't an email working? It works for everyone else. But everyone's different. And I'm happy I did it, because my life is way easier now. So gather info when it's not urgent. That kind of goes with plenty of time. But the biggest thing is you have to check in with people on what the busy season is. So a lot of times I find this is really important for fundraisers, if you work with them or if you are one. I always have to ask, when are your fundraising events? Most of them know at the start of the year. So then I have a client where I just don't talk to them in October, just don't. And they tell me, and I tell them I know that, And I always check in. I'm like, just checking in. I don't talk to you in October, right? And they're like, yep. So what does that mean, though? Everything has to get done in September, even if the due dates are in October. And if I didn't know that until August, that would make my life horrible. But I know that in January, so it's not a problem. So just check in with people, and that can be the case for program people too. They might have like a really, really big event happening for a week, and they just are not going to respond to your email, and you're going to be emailing them and saying like, why are they ignoring me? Like, what's going on? They always respond, again, not assuming good intention, and it's just because they're not at their phone because they're doing like a week-long program retreat or something. So again, if you know, you're going to save yourself so much stress in the future, and that person will be very grateful that you're working around them. And it goes the other way. If you know you have crazy busy seasons, like me, in June, my baby's going to be born, tell people. Tell them. They don't know that. I don't want to just disappear and people are emailing me like, Hannah, hello. And then offer the apology that others won't. This one is really big, and depending on how you were raised or your background, it can be really hard. This was a hard one for me to learn because my parents never apologized for things that they should have. So I just learned if you're an adult, you just don't apologize. And I'm not that way now. And I have found this to mitigate a lot of conflict. I'll give one example, but I'll have another one in a few slides. But this actually happened like 2 days ago. We were giving a training online, and I just completely forgot to email someone the info. Totally forgot. It was my bad. I didn't realize it. So the training was going on. It was on Zoom. And she emailed us, everyone, not just me, included my boss, and was like, where's the Zoom link? Why haven't I been sent this? And was clearly upset. And I could tell she thought that I did it on purpose because she was not assuming good intention. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I hate conflict. This is horrible. My boss is seeing this. And I responded right away. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. Here's the Zoom link. It's recorded. Like, you've only missed 10 minutes, but I just apologized. And then I sent it to her, and she was like, okay, weird. And then, I could tell, thought I purposely didn't include her. And I responded right away, and I was like, no, this is on me. I just forgot to include you. I'm so sorry. Because I wanted to, cut that. I wanted her to know this was not on purpose. I did not mean to hurt her or to exclude her. I was going to kick that across the football field and out of there. I did not want her to think that at all. And she said, oh, okay, thank you. And you could tell she was totally fine after that. But again, part of this is I'm very sensitive. That's my harmony. I can tell when people are mad at me. And I know for some people, that's not the case. Melanie would probably read that email and be like, what is happening? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so again, it's a strength of mine though. But you can tell, you can get clued into when people aren't assuming good intention on your part. And that's when it comes to you to remind them that no, this was a mistake. This was my fault. I wasn't just the internet or just something like that, or my email forgot you. I literally just forgot her. It happens. It's okay. And I think part of it too is that I responded really quickly. I didn't wait a week and be like, by the way, oops, So I think she also appreciated that. Okay, so I think there's a few more, and then I can show you my examples. Oh yeah.
I just want to add one thing. The apology. So there's two kinds of apologies, right? There's the apology that Hannah's talking about, which is I did something I shouldn't, or didn't do something I should have. It's my fault. I apologize. I'm sorry about that. But there's also the apology that is, I'm sorry this has happened to you. That's not, I did it. It's, I can see that you're in distress, and I'm sorry that this has happened. And I apologize all the time, on number 2, especially. Because I found, and again, this is part of people hire us as consultants when things are going wrong a lot of times, right? So we do a lot of conflict. The room is already charged when we arrive, right? Well, I wasn't even there. It's obviously not my fault, whatever has happened, but I apologize all the time. I am so sorry that you've had to deal with this. That sounds like a really tough situation. I am really sorry that your predecessor in this role didn't leave you better records. I'm really sorry that you have a board chair that you can't get a hold of. I'm sorry. And you would be amazed at how much that diffuses the tension. Even though they know it's not my fault, right? I know it's not my fault, but they want an apology, right? Something has happened that has hurt them, and they are waiting for an apology. And if the person that did that is not willing, I will do that. And it works fabulously, because once they have that apology, it's like we can move on, right? So I do that all the time. I apologize for stuff that has nothing to do with me because I want them to know that I see that problem and I acknowledge it, and that I'm sorry for their challenge, right? So that's a really great tool in your toolkit to apologize that way. Also, I wanted to say on the previous slide, let people do the right thing for the wrong reason. I'm kind of an idealist, and when I was young, I was like, everybody is ethical and would do all the right things all the time. And if go ahead, laugh at my 22-year-old self. And I learned, of course, that wasn't true. But for a long time, it was so frustrating to me. Like, how can you not want to do this? It's obviously the right thing to do, right? And ethics are important to me. I'm like, I do not understand why you don't want to do this. But I learned as I got older that only hurts me, right? I mean, have the conversation, right? Try to, talk about it, fine. But there's some people that just won't. And so that being frustrated just hurt me. And I learned if somebody's not wanting to do something for the right reason, I got to find out a way to motivate them to do it for the wrong reason. It's true. I mean, I do, right? Because I want the right thing getting done, right? If clients are getting served, I don't care why you did it, right? I do secretly, deep down. But I've learned to just smile and let people do it for the wrong reason. So, for example, I had a client early in my consulting career who was doing some stuff that was not inclusive of the community, right? And that sticks in my heart hard. And so I tried to have that conversation as a consultant. Sometimes people will listen to you and they won't listen to others, right? I was like, it is really a best practice, to design your programs by them for the community, and these are some areas that you could strengthen, blah, blah, blah. They didn't care. They're like, nah. And that just made me go, that made me curse into my pillow. But what happened was eventually, right, grant funders, started really caring a lot about that issue, right? We had grant funders who were really looking hard at what's the composition of your board, where is your program design coming from, how do you incorporate the voices of the community into your ongoing, program design and changes. And so I went back to this client and said, you have $750,000 in grant money, and you're going to lose it if you don't adopt a DEI plan and get serious about it. And what do you know? They did that right away. I don't care. It got done, right? You just have to sometimes try to, what angle is going to motivate them to do it? And if it's not, the angle that you're coming from, sometimes you just have to be okay with that. Has anyone ever done that or had thoughts about that? Or I love this will make your life easier argument. If we do this, it'll make it'll take this off your plate. It'll solve this problem you're dealing with. Bosses love that, right? Okay. Any thoughts or questions about any of that? Kelly?
If a business or a group gives a large donation just to better their own image,
Yes.
the people that need help still get the donation.
Yes.
It doesn't matter that they did it for selfish reasons.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they got helped. That's all.
Now you have to be careful. You're not promoting their business if it's contrary to your mission. You can't do that. But yeah, absolutely. I'll take your money no matter why you're giving it and do good with it. I will. Right? I'm not going to give you promotion if it's not mission, centric, but I'll take the donation, sure. Because people need it. And I always think about our clients. I used to work at a women's shelter, and I think does this client care where this money came from if I can pay her deposit on her new home? If I go to her and say, don't worry, client, I know that you need a new home and applied for that transitional housing, and we could have funded it for you, but I stuck on my principles and rejected that donation. Is a client going to feel served? No. So let people do the right thing for the wrong reason.
All right, so a few more tips. Some of them, a lot of these kind of weave together. Showing up for your coworkers. So this is kind of managing at the same level of people versus up and down. But you can think about up and down too. But just care about the people you work with. Melanie was talking about, do you know what they care about? Do you know their pets' names, their kids' names? I don't know if, Melanie, you shared about the hopes and fears thing, but she always says if you know what someone hopes for and what they fear, you have a pretty good, solid relationship with them. And honestly, I think I know that about all of my coworkers. Part of it, though, is I'm very like, let's get deep. That's just like who I am. And so my poor coworkers are like, but again, though, it makes it so much easier to work with each other when you actually like feel like you can share. I think we all feel in a place where we feel comfortable saying like, can you take on this work because of this? It just makes your life so much easier because you work with those people all the time, right? Sometimes, I mean, my husband's this way, like he sees his coworkers probably more than he sees me. I mean, it's a wild idea, but that's the truth. And so he has coworkers that he doesn't like working with. He doesn't know those things about him. And it makes his life so hard. And then I feel very lucky where I work. And then again, it goes, give them space to talk about who or what they love. So that just would mean like going out to coffee or spending 10 extra minutes on Zoom to just talk instead of talking about work, right? Texting them. I have one that we text a lot because everyone's different in their communication. But again, you have to make that space. Make it a part of your work time because it is. I mean, you got to take the time out of your work to get to know your coworkers and to get to know your clients, get to know your board. I mean, you're doing that for your board and your clients. You got to do it with your coworkers as well. Send things just because it's helpful to them, not just because they need it. So I do this a lot because I'm a learner. That's one of my strengths, and I love studies. So if I find something that I think is really useful to one of my coworkers because they focus on economic development, but I don't, I send it to them right away. I'm like, I haven't really read this thoroughly, but I think it'd be useful to you, and they're always so thankful, right? And I'm not trying to tell, like, it's not me saying I don't think you're doing your job well. I'm just saying, I think this is helpful, helping you out a little bit, you know? And so, again, I appreciate it when people do that for me. They always appreciate it as well. Handwritten thank you notes, especially do this, like, if someone had to do something really last minute or they saved you from something. Happens a lot of times with clients. A proposal comes in and we only have a week to do it, so I'm sending an email begging someone to send me something in a day or two. I should thank them and acknowledge that that was hard and that, wow, thank you, because we couldn't have submitted it if you didn't respond. And just acknowledging that. I mean, you're not saying that's the norm. Of course, I would never always assume 2 days for stuff. But when they appreciate that, because you're acknowledging that was hard and I couldn't have done it without you, literally. So I feel. And again, this goes with the I'm sorry thing that Melanie was talking about, but like acknowledge when situations are hard for people, even if you have nothing to do with it. Like, I'm so sorry that your boss did that, you know, right? It wasn't you, it was the boss that did that. I do that a lot with my clients with difficult funders. Right? I have nothing to do with that funder. I don't like decide their reporting requirements or matching funds, but I do acknowledge to my clients when those things are really hard and a little ridiculous sometimes, and they appreciate that because I think a lot of times people get in their head and they think like, am I just overthinking this? Am I just over complaining? Like, and when you acknowledge and you say that sorry, like it kind of puts that wall down. I'm like, oh, okay. If Hannah's saying that this is ridiculous and she's like a grant pro, then I'm probably right. And it just makes it a little easier to get through it. Suggest solutions along with problems. This is huge. Huge. Melanie talked about it, but I do this a lot with my emails. I'll show an example. Never just say that there's a problem. Please don't. If you do it, if you've done it, it's okay. But we've all done it, I'm sure I have. It's okay if the solution is bad. My husband calls it the McDonald's effect. If you're just like, where do you want to go eat? And the person's like, I don't know. And then they're like, McDonald's? No, not McDonald's. How about Olive Garden? Or, you know, like, I don't want a hamburger. You just have to suggest something. And then all the solutions will come, right? Because it's like, oh, yeah, hamburger sounds good, but how about Five Guys? You know, like stuff like that. And so it's okay if the solution is, like, bad. Just start somewhere instead of saying nothing. So I would just always suggest that. And I think people have solutions in mind. It's just like they need to have a starting point. Some people just don't like to be the starters of fixing it. They just want to complain. But as soon as you put it in there, like, they have lots of opinions. So just just go with that. You don't have to be the person who fixes everything perfectly. And again, you don't have to be that person. It's okay. We just need it to be fixed. And then recognize and thank people, especially in front of their boss. I do this all the time. I love doing it because I'm a consultant. I always like if I have a program person who basically sent me everything I needed, but then the person above them who submits and gets that like dopamine of like, yeah, it's submitted, and the poor program person didn't get that little dopamine. I always include them in that submission, and I say, thank you so much, X, for providing all of the data and for your wonderful job doing this program. Like, I loved seeing the stats. You guys went over and beyond what you said you would do. Like, thank you, person. And I include them in the email, right? I don't have to do that. But especially, like, how else would their boss know? Sometimes it's great and I'm an outside person, but even internal, I mean, you might know more about how well someone's doing than their boss does because you see them all the time, or you're the reporter and things like that. Or you found an awesome story about a therapy session with a thing, like send that to their boss and say, like, look at this awesome story. Isn't X doing a wonderful job? And those are just like happy emails too. I feel like we all need happy emails. We get a lot of stressful emails. So I do that a lot with my clients, but also with my coworkers, and we have a system actually where we do this, so I'll share that. And then this one depends on the person. Some people can handle soft suggestions of deadlines. So that's when you say, like, if you can send this by the 31st, that would be great. Not everyone is that way. Most of the people I work with are not that way. But I think it takes a little bit of time to know how people work. So I usually start this way, and if it hasn't worked like 2 times, then I go to, please send this to me by X, and I bold it, and I sometimes underline it, and I sometimes put it in the little subject line. But of course, it's like if you don't know that person, you might as well start nice, suggest things. Okay, you can go on. Okay, so here's an example of how I live these tips, values, in real life, internally. So I created this project management document for internal. I did it just for myself. I love color coding. I love systems. And my coworkers loved it so much that we all use it. So we meet once a week, and we all have one of these. The top is usually like questions or general updates. We have the date. And then, of course, it's a like internal project management meeting, so we have to tell Melanie what we're working on that week. So that's what the top 2 are. That's kind of like boring. Like, that's just our job. But what I added, what I think is a lot of fun, is I have a highlight, and it can be as many as you want. We do like something personal and something that's about work. So my highlight, this was last week, is I found out I'm having a baby girl. So I'm super excited. This highlight this week was that I named my baby girl. Her name is Cecilia. And my other highlight is that I read 1 chapter of a book about grants because I'm going to take my grant professional certification. So I was very proud of myself that I actually found the time to do professional development because that's always a problem when you're very busy. So I have there, like, I'm sharing about myself. It's okay if it's not about work. That's almost better. That's a way you can manage up by creating a culture where we talk more than just about work. Right? And I'm sharing something very impersonal, like the gender of my child. So they were actually like the first people I told because I was still waiting for my like gender reveal party, but I told all of them. And then team shout outs. So I just included some people because I didn't want it to be too long. But I do this. I include every person, and I say one good thing that I just want to shout them out from the week before. And this is how I acknowledge people in front of their boss. Right? Of course, I'm shouting out my boss, but she's my boss. But I always do it for all my coworkers as well. So I have Melanie, of course. Again, for me, it's very important that Melanie is so understanding that I have a child, that she understands I owe family first. So I'm thanking her for that, acknowledging her, and just like being like, thank you. And then Leilani, she presented for something I couldn't do very last minute, and I was super thankful for her last week. And I was just telling her, thank you so much, and that she did a great job. Because it was on Zoom, so I couldn't talk to her after. I just had to, like, get off and, like, go do Batman stickers with my son. So I didn't get to tell her that. I mean, I could have just forgotten to. So it's a great thing. We usually actually read them out loud in front of each other. Or if someone misses, we all love to go in if we missed a week and just read all the nice stuff people said about us. It can be fun. I have one where she loves cats, so every week is just a picture of my cat and then like something good she did, but like just fun things. It adds to the culture of the work. And I just did this for myself, but they all adopted it. So feel free. I make it on Google Docs. So super easy. I can share it with you guys if you want the template, if you think it'd be helpful. Okay, so example 2, a little more serious. Talking about when I cried. Okay, so this was Hannah hates conflict. Client shared a concern. So I had a client in a very busy season send me an email where they were asking that I share things earlier. And they noted that working with me was a pain point for their staff. And when I read that, I went, and she included my boss, and I started crying. I saw the email, dropping off my son, and I was literally like bawling. And I was like, I'm horrible at my job. They're talking about me behind my back. And I was like so upset about it. It was because of the word pain point. And because of course I never meant to do that. I wasn't trying to do that. It's like the last thing I wanted. So my immediate reaction was I upset and I cried. Because remember, I'm oversensitive. So and I'm also say yes to everything. So of course was in a season where I was like really, really busy and felt like I already feel like I can't do everything well. So seeing that was like acknowledging that. And so I was like, whoa. Okay, and then I had to remember, because Melanie had presented this before. And I was like, okay, assume good intention and to remind myself that it's not always about me. It doesn't mean that the email wasn't a little mean, that she could have said it a little nicer, that maybe she couldn't have done it in an email. But I also don't know what's going on in their life, right? Like, they work in a very, very crisis-centered place. So they could have been up all night for 48 hours. Like, that is just something I assume with everyone that I work with there. And you're not going to send the nicest email if you haven't slept in 2 days. Maybe their kid's sick. Maybe they're sick. Maybe someone passed away. It's not about me. Even if the email is not nice. It's not about me. And clearly, this is my response. But the way they wrote it, they clearly wanted a solution. So it wasn't just like, we're just complaining to complain because you suck, you know. It was like, this is a pain point. Can we create a solution for it? And so, biggest thing I feel like I learned from that was just not to respond right away. So I waited a few hours, wiped the tears, had a little coffee, and then I responded. And I deleted stuff that would have made it obvious who I was talking to. But I offered the apology that others won't. I mean, it kind of was my fault, but also I wasn't the nicest email, so I was like, I was definitely being grudgy. But the first thing I did was I thanked them for sharing this with me, because I wouldn't have known unless they told me. I would have had no idea. I would have just kept doing what I was doing, and they would have kept being mad at me. And I apologized, because there were times I did not give them enough time. Now, some of that was on them. Wasn't on me. But I didn't say that. And then I asked a solution. So I said, would it be helpful if I send you guys an email on the 15th that's just everything we need to get done for that month? And then I said, happy to do that if you think that's helpful. And then I said another solution of, we'll happily send things in the time frame that you want. Happy to. And then I asked them, because I hadn't, this is why I was telling you guys the tip, if they could let me know when their most busy seasons are. Because I hadn't done that. So I think I was asking for them for a lot of stuff in like a really busy season. And so that's why it was a pain point. But I didn't know that. So I learned, I was like, oh man, I need to ask them. I assumed it was just October, but I think there's more than that. And then I asked them to do that. We have a grants calendar, so I just reshared it with them. I was like, by the way, all the information is on this calendar. Do you read it? No, but it's there. And then I just thanked them again for their honesty, and I apologized again. Was it hard? Yes. Was I upset? Yes. Was this the way to go? Yes. And so that was a harder way, but again, I'm proud of my response. And so here, yes.
I just want to interject this. Hannah is harder on herself. They did not say you are a pain point. That was not the way they did. But as part of our evaluation internally every year, I talk to all of our clients about their project managers, and then we send out survey to our clients about whether or not they like working with us in general. We do both of those things. And when I talk to this client that this has happened with, I always ask them, like, what was the highlight of your year? What was really helpful? And they told me, they was like, man, we brought a certain concern to Hannah, and she fixed it right away. And it is just better now than it has ever been, and we just really appreciated that. And that was, like, the thing that they liked the most, was that was her response. And so I think sometimes when there's conflict, you might think of it as an opportunity, right, to fix something that will make your path a little easier.
Oh, it definitely was, because this was a solution, and I still do this, even though that person who had said the concern isn't there anymore. I still do it, and I probably will implement it with other clients when they're ready. But yes, it did create a fix that I love and they love. So in the end, it was wonderful. And I mean, I always think my client, they should be honest. They should tell me, even if I cry. It's okay. I cry about everything. So monthly check-ins. So this is kind of, I had made that internal doc. This is like an external doc if you work, but I mean, you could think of it as like fundraising, work talking to program A talking to program B, board members, like you're the executive director talking to board members. You could do it any way that involves managing people around. So I say, again, wins from last month. It's the same idea as the internal one. I always want to thank people. If we got grant funding, I will usually add, if it's really important, a program person to say like, they supplied so much information for that. I thank them there. I include important action items, and I include the name of the person that needs to do those action items. And I do this with everyone because I want there to be accountability, right? If I just email it to that person and myself, no one else knows. If it's here, everyone knows. But we're also a team, right? It's a we, it's not an I. So I'm not doing it to be rude. I'm just doing it so we can all keep each other accountable. I always thank people, so I say like, thank you so much. Like if they need to go talk to a program officer or something, I'm like, thank you so much for doing that. Like, I'm not allowed to do that as my job. I always bold if there's due dates, and I always offer different ways to communicate, even if I know that person's style, because I know it changes sometimes. So I say, if it's easier to talk about this over a phone call or a text, please do. And for some people, I'll just even put my number, because sometimes I don't know if they've saved it in their phone. But I always do that, because sometimes I have weeks where I'm like, oh, I'd rather just call them. And I don't want them to feel like that's not okay if that's not like our thing, is that we don't call. So I have example, the A, B, usually I send this to 2 people. I say what we submitted prior to just remind them of like, we submitted this was the day it was due. I usually thank them, like, thank you for responding for that request. For that specific one, I had to ask someone something really last minute, so I thank them. And then just a general like project management tips. I always highlight in bold things for what's most important, right? Because I deleted this stuff too, but it technically has like 15. Like, we're very busy. And if I didn't bold or do anything, it would just be like, oh, okay, whatever. And so I bold. Like, if someone's really busy and I want them to see it on their phone, I'm like, what do I want them to see? I don't want them to see stuff that we haven't decided yet, like we haven't decided what program, or we haven't decided how much money, or I want them to see when they need to respond by. And I always do this too, because that's how my brain works. I put the day, but I also put like the number day, because people just need to be reminded like what day it is. And so I found that to be really helpful, actually. Like, it seems kind of silly, but seeing just Thursday, something about it isn't gonna move them. Yeah, I don't know why, it works. So do both and bold it. It's okay to do bold, you're not being too much. You're not, people are busy. And it's okay to highlight different colors, do it all. So that's just general thing, but that was the fix. So I wasn't doing that before. And I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't giving them enough time, because I thought what I was doing was enough time, and it wasn't. And now things are great. I mean, I'm still have to prod them and like but that's my job. And this makes them feel so much better, because they meet monthly to talk about grants. And you know what they use for that meeting? This. They don't have to create it themselves. I made their job easier. And you know why that makes me so happy? Because I made it. So it has everything I want them to know. So things like that too. Like, I'm not in on that meeting because I don't work there, but I'm so happy that I'm kind of am there. They're like, here's my little thing. So I think the next slide is just things that have worked for you all. If you want to share tips or tricks, or if you have a problem and want to think of a solution for it. Yeah.
I have a question about what we're but when trying to help staff get to know one another and have that understanding, I know like staff retreats are really important, but when people have such different schedules and kind of feel like, sure, I don't mind spending time getting to know my staff members, but it feels like more work is going to be piled on because while we're doing this, the phone's still ringing, the project's not getting done, I'm going to have to make up for it. How can I help with that? Like, how can I help with like the creating more time where there's not more time in a week, but it's important work?
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to assign that project to someone who has a harmony strength, right? So this is, I mean, look at your staff. Like, who is the person that's going to love this, right? I talked at the beginning of our session today that I'm task-oriented and insensitive, right? I would never have created that team never. Never. But I love it, right? But, I mean, that came from Hannah because, like, harmony is her thing, right? And that's her strength. It's what she brings to us. So I think just like thinking about who on your staff is the person that's going to run with that and then give that to them as a project. And don't be that prescriptive. Just say, we need some more team building. What do you think? And just let them tell you. One of the things that we did when I was on staff somewhere is and this was a suggestion of one of our employees who was a harmony person. She asked if we could put a big cork board in our break room that was our kudos board. She was like, because we're a 24-hour facility, people are working different shifts. She's like, there's so much work that all of us do that nobody ever sees and can't appreciate because they don't see it, right? So I just had the cork board hung, which is the total sum that I did. But then it got started to be filled with every time somebody did something, like somebody would put it on a Post-it and hang it on the cork board. And like that was the thing everyone did when they came to work at first thing in the morning. That's where everybody stopped, is like, read what's new on the cork board. And it became like a thing. I would never have done that. But it was great. And so that's, again, if you have somebody that's leading up to you, that's what's great, right? Like, you get everybody's strengths if you do that. So if you don't have time, I would find somebody who is going to love that and put them in charge of it. And if you're a small staff, like, that could be a board member who has that skill, who just gives you some ideas, like, here's some ideas you could do. So, or if a volunteer that you have that has that, if you don't have a staff member. It's a great question. I wanted to say one thing about Hannah before we have some other suggestions about the role of accountability and communication. Like, that is so huge in managing up, that you have an organizational culture and systems that hold people accountable and that celebrate people. That's like, it's the carrot and the stick, right? You need both. One of the things that I always recommend boards doing that works beautifully is that have a document, like a Google spreadsheet, very easy. Have every board member's name on a row, like every board member has their own row. And when board members say that they're going to do something in a board meeting, oh, next time I'm going to do this or that or the other, you put that on their line, on their row, right? And then the first thing you do every board meeting is everyone looks at that doc. And I used to, when I was executive director, I would just put everything on that row that they had done. Like, Jeff took Melanie and introduced her to this and that mayor. Leslie designed our brochure. And this board member helped look at our personnel policies. Like, because again, if you have a board, they don't see the work that each other does either. And so they think, well, I'm not hearing about anybody else doing anything, so they must not be doing anything. Therefore, it's cool if I don't do anything, right? That's the way it works. So if you have that doc, and I mean, it worked beautifully because like board members would be calling me the day before a board meeting. Melanie, don't forget that I did this. I did that. Make sure it's on the doc, because nobody wanted blank space next to their name, right? So I think like just coming up with some systems by which you make sure that everybody knows what work is getting done or what work is not getting done can really help you a lot. And that makes it easier to manage up because you kind of already know sort of all those things. And you have a team culture of collaboration and communication. So that's better.
So I did the whole doc, but I gave it to my board chair, so he could be like the one presenting it. He absolutely hated it and would not use it.
Okay.
So
Because?
I throwing people under the bus if there was a blank line or something.
Yeah.
He was way too nice. So, and then my ED did not want to do it because that is definitely not in her character strength at all. So is that still something as a development person that is acceptable for me to present?
Yes, I think there's a couple ways to go about that. One is it's kind of how you pitch it, right? I pitched that. I didn't say to my board, we're going to do this so that you all are held accountable for all the stuff you don't do. I said it, all of you all do stuff that nobody sees, and I want to make sure we celebrate you. That is how I pitched it, right? Which is true. That's not disingenuous. Like, I wanted the board members who are doing all this stuff I wanted everybody to know that they did all that stuff for us. We looked at it at the end of the year, and everybody chose like the highlights of things they had done for the organization over the year and talked about it. Like, it was definitely like pitched as a celebratory thing. But there's a couple things you could do. I mean, you could go to, if you have a development committee chair, that person could be the one. If you don't, then I think that's fine that that's you. But I think the key is that everybody has a row, right? Like, you don't just write down only the people who've done, like, everybody has a row, so there's a blank.
And I do have a different chair now, so I
Yeah.
can pitch it to her and she might do it.
And the other thing is, I mean, I've worked with boards who have put together a committee, they call it different things, but basically for that kind of stuff. And so if you have another board member who is a harmonier and like is the person that's going to be excited about that, you could put them in charge of that. I mean, you may not have the authority to do that as a development director, but you could suggest that. Yeah, but I think pitching it as a celebratory thing would be helpful. Any other thoughts, questions? What works for you all managing up? Anything we haven't talked about? Yeah. Sure.
Here's something pretty specific, and maybe you could extract something that would be more general and helpful for more people.
Sure.
Like for me, I'm a communications director at a smallish nonprofit that's not here. And we have a new ED and an all-volunteer board, which I think is pretty normal. And I also have a very precarious situation with like lots of junior staff who are we're in a very challenging cultural time. So there's compression from like tension on both sides, board side, junior staff side, new ED, like leadership team is pretty thin. And I'm managing a brand refresh, which includes a new logo, which is like, my people like lose their minds. And then it's so emotional. And a new website, which is like right now, just kind of like less emotional because it's over here, but as soon as like we hit go, I'm sure it's gonna be like, ah! So right now, there's like this lag where I presented everything to the board and got like no feedback in real time, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I was expecting like at least some resistance or questions or whatever, and then a month later, when I've already sealed it with the graphic designer and moved on to the next phase of design, I'm getting pushback. And my ED, who had also been like, oh great, everything's great, is now like, well, I have to manage board expectations now. So now I'm in a position of, I'm gonna either be behind on timeline and budget, or I have to convince folks that like everything's okay. So it's more of a change management, but it's definitely a managing up. I have limited experience navigating this board and this new ED.
Yeah. Do you have relationships with them, with your board members and your ED?
I have a relationship with some of the board members. We have a communications committee, and I presented to them first to kind of get them, and also felt that they were like going to be helpful, if not ambassadors, at least like they were on board with us moving forward.
Yeah. So the question is, if your board has shown no objection to a project you're working on, and then after you have finished it, objects, and your ED is not being very helpful in navigating that. Am I correct?
Yeah, I just feel stuck, like, what is my obligation at this point? Because I have an obligation to like a budget and a timeline for the organization, and then I also have people who are like, have opinions and feelings, and I'm trying. My inclination, because I'm a very direct and like research-based process person is like, this is in motion, like,
Yeah.
we've done the due process, let's just go.
Yeah,
But then there's like the feeling side of it, and I'm trying to
sure.
honor that.
Sure. I find people's feelings to be challenging as well. There are a couple things. I would say your chair of your communications committee should be your ally in that. I would focus on that relationship first and find out what they want to do. But I would absolutely request a formal, official restructuring of your budget and your timeline in that. And that's just, we approved this, now we're going to go a different direction. You don't have to be, mad about it, but like, we're doing a different direction, and so we're going to need more budget and more timeline to get that done. And sometimes boards will decide that it's okay if it's going to cost them more money for it not to be okay. Yeah.
Why do you
Yes. Again, let people do the right thing for the wrong reason, right? If they don't want to invest a lot more money in it, and you're happy with it the way it is, then see if that can scare them into being being okay with it.
That's how this board gives you the money to say like, yeah, I'll pay for it. Like,
Yeah, I think that's what I would do. And I think we could do like a half-day session on board dynamics. But I find that like something that important, like something that huge, especially something that's going to take so much of the staff's time, I would take the time to talk to each board member individually. Before, you can't do that now, it's after the fact, but like I would, or send a survey or find some way, because again, what happens is board members are not paying attention at your board meetings, their kids, it's a snow day and their kids are running around behind them, or they mean to ask you later and they just forget, they're going to follow up and then they don't. I find like that if the board meeting is the only opportunity for them to see and respond, I think it's trouble. I would just go to each board member first.
And I was like, oh, good, and maybe I took that for granted.
Yeah. And that's tricky. It's tricky. But you can have your communications committee reach out. It doesn't have to be you specifically reaching out to every board member, but I would cover all your bases first. I always kind of think about boards in general of, like, if you're going to vote on something at a meeting, like, you should be absolutely confident about what's going to happen, right? Like, you should have done the work before the meeting in your ED, before the meeting, to make sure that you have everybody's buy-in before you take the vote, right? You don't want board members like just like running off with whatever that's on their mind spontaneously. Yeah, so I would reach out to them ahead of time.
I've only been the treasurer of my board for, what's today, the 20-something?
24 days?
24 days, and I have used money so much. Because if we don't have the money, we don't have enough. I'm also fundraising chair, so I'm also kind of like...
You mean you leverage that?
Yes, and it works. Like, because they may think they have a really strong opinion, but then if they see how much money it's going to cost to pay that graphic designer again and everything, they're going to be like, actually, that logo is really awesome. Like, they may feel that way. And another thing, like, for the future, what I would do is give people a deadline to respond by, and bold it and underline it, and say, if you don't respond by this day, that's it. It's over. And if they see that and it's in email... Because that's how you get of course, I probably would have given them a month to respond for something like that. But if they respond like 3 months later, it's like, well, sorry, that's way too late. And I also, a lot of people, I'm this way. I hate talking in front of people. This is really funny that I'm doing this. But especially in board meetings, like I hate putting my opinion out there and seeing everyone's reactions because like the cameras are on and stuff. So for people, like, expect them to email you for things like that. For something that might be like they think everyone else likes it and it's just them that doesn't. Always invite ways for people to get feedback one-on-one with a communications chair, or to give it in an email and they see the communication to the communications chair and CC you as communication person. Because that's just people. Some people love to talk during board meetings. Some people don't, but everyone's values are equal. It's just our style. So just kind of, again, board dynamics.
Mm-hmm. And board processes are made for extroverts. If you are an introvert, it is not made for you. I'm an introvert, served on a lot of boards. And it's like, I want the stuff in advance so I have time to look at it and think about it and plan, what I want to say. I think that that's an important component. We lose a lot of introverted feedback just because we want to throw something out there and the two extroverted people on our board are going to hog the conversation. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we do professionally is we do board assessments where we organizations hire us to interview every board member about how they feel about fundraising, like what their comfort level in fundraising and their level of knowledge about fundraising. And then we combine that and present it to them, like, here is your board feedback. And it is amazing. Like, they're like, oh, I never knew. And it's because there's people that just don't like to talk in front of people, and you're not providing like an opportunity for them to give meaningful feedback, or for forcing people to think on the spot, right?
Yeah.
Like I can provide feedback, but I need like some time to look at this.
That's so interesting, because I thought of that with the junior staff, but I haven't thought of that with the board. I just kind of think of them as like a different set of creatures.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you guys are fine. Like,
Yeah.
you're on your own.
And board members don't want to admit that they don't know something, right? So they're not going to say, I'm not sure about this, I don't know. No board member's ever going to say, I don't know, because they don't. Good for you. You are a board member that we all want. Also, I think that what happens sometimes with that kind of stuff is if you're not using your board member's skill set and they don't have a project they're working on for you that is in their skill set, then they will try to, they feel like they need to be doing something. I'm a board member, I gotta be doing something, so I'm gonna complain about this because I mean, what else do I have to do, right? I want to say that I've done something as a board member, right? So I think that boards are happier when, you know, your human resources professional on your board is reviewing your personnel policies, and our police captain is, you know, is coordinating, better coordination between us and the police department, and your marketing person is reviewing. Like when everyone is doing their thing, they'll feel less need to pile on to things that are not their thing. So I think that's also like your board composition, how you use them. You don't ever want to say all board members are going to do this, right? Because you shouldn't. If all board members can do that, then you don't have a diverse enough board, right? So I think that can kind of head you off in the front end of that kind of stuff. Because then your communications folks that are professionals in the communications field need to tell the board, we've reviewed this, this is, you know, blah, 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 blah. Somebody who is an accountant may not have as much meaningful input into logo design as someone who is a graphic designer for a living, right? So I think your board has to be sensitive to that too. Sure. Anything else that works for you all? Thoughts? I have a few more slides, but anything else? Or anything that you're struggling with that we have not covered, anything to assist you with? No? Okay, a few final thoughts. Sometimes none of it works, right? I'm not here to say that if you do, you know, X, Y, or Z, it will always work for you. I mean, I think it's rare that there is nothing you can do, right? I mean, I think most situations can be handled if you work at it and are strategic about it. I think situations where it's just a dead end and you just cannot do anything about it is often people who are abusive or have like some bad stuff going on. So if none of it works, and I want to say, don't battle the brick wall. Like if you truly have tried everything and there's just nothing else you can do, there's nothing else you can do. And don't take that emotionally on yourself as, you know, something that brings you down, right? You want to try everything first, like you want to give it a good try. But if you don't have success, then you just have to accept that. So some things that you can do, change your goal. So maybe this project that you're wanting to launch, or this initiative that you're wanting to do, or this thing that you're wanting to fix, maybe that's a dead end. Is there something else you could focus on that you would also be interested in that might carry some more weight, right? Can you shift focus? If there's nothing that you can do to influence the organization, then your own professional development and growth. Like that's always the thing that all of us should be focused on all the time. So if you can't make headway there, like figure out how can you grow in the position you're in? How can you continue to invest in yourself? Focusing on ourselves can sometimes lessen our frustrations with the organization. Different coworker. So let's say that you are. I'm a very big believer in like the coalition of the willing, in the power of the coalition of the willing in organizations. So if it's your boss that is not listening to you and you can't break through and you can't do anything, find a project, invent a project that you have the authority to implement in your job, and find the coworkers that are going to be enthusiastic about working with you on that. And do that project with them, because what happens is, and I've seen this lots and lots of times, what happens is that project becomes really successful. Everybody else at the organization starts looking at it like, oh, that department, wow, they did, wow, what? And then you got some visibility. So then it's harder for your boss later to say no when you can say this is we're very successful, right? And the more people that you can get bought into that, and again, this is assuming that this is in their job description. I mean, I'm not saying to go off and do something random, but the more people that you can get involved in that, the more buy-in you're going to have throughout your organization. And it becomes much harder when you have a culture change happening. That is much harder for someone to manage, right? Like to someone to say no to. Like you can't say no to just like a culture change that's happening. And so can be a strategy that's helpful. And then, you know, at the end of the day, if it's not a fit for you, it's not a fit for you, and you need to plan your next step, right? Find another job, find another organization, find another mentor. someone else. Because again, your happiness and your professional development is number one. I think people, especially people who work in like social service agencies, I mean, we're always trying to put our community before ourselves, which is backwards, right? Because our number one job is to take care of ourselves, right? You can't, fill someone else's bucket if your bucket is empty, right? So think about where your next move might be. I like to, if you have experience with this kind of thing, it's great to ask in a job interview for a job that you're trying to interview, to get. Like, it's great to ask some of these questions. Like, what is the structure for someone to bring ideas? What is the what kind of staff recognition do you do? What kind of professional development plans? I mean, all those questions are really important to ask to try to get a feel for a better fit for you that's going to be more supportive. The next one. We talked about that, yes. And culture change takes time. If you're building a culture, if you're changing a culture, that takes time. And so you want to celebrate small wins, right? So it's not something that you're going to influence, by next week. So be patient, celebrate those small wins, get more and more people on board. I think successful professionals who are passionate and successful, it's like gravity, right? You're going to attract more and more people the larger you get. So start small with what you can do now, and then, trust that you're going to be growing. And that's going to come naturally when you're successful at what you do. And then finally, don't do this, right? Don't do these things. These things are toxic to you and to your organization and to your clients and to your mission and to the community and everyone. If you're becoming a person who's always negative about everything and you feel that, like, you definitely need a different job. And you need to get out before that sabotages you, right? Don't encourage divisions. Don't snark at people and gossip about people. That's exhausting for everyone, right? If you need to snark about something, then do it on your own time, like not in the office, right? Do it with your friend or your spouse or whatever. Don't send contentious emails. I'm like, if anybody could be in any way upset about this, I'm going to call instead, right? I'm never going to put anything in writing that somebody is going to be real upset about. And don't shame people in front of your boss. You celebrate people in front of your boss, but you don't shame people that way. So these things do not work for helping you manage up. And then just a reminder, no matter what anyone says, and no matter what anyone does, and no matter whether your boss likes your ideas or not, and no matter whether you're making traction or not, you are powerful and skilled and worthy, right? You are, all of you. So don't let someone eat away at that belief. And it just means that you've got work to do, you've got a job to change, you've got decisions to make. But you are all of these things now, no matter what happens. So just remember. Final thoughts, questions? Yes.
I have another resource that I think is really helpful. There's the Management Center online has a lot of free templates. So if you're looking for like a more kind of sophisticated but customizable Google Doc or something for like one-on-one check-ins with either direct reports, or I've actually tried to use it with my boss to various levels of success. We applied like, okay, he'll do this, he won't do this, so try and figure out what works. But they have some pretty good templates that are all free as well. So I would just put that out as a resource as well that are comparable to what you were using, Hannah, as well, with like celebrating wins and like identifying challenges and putting things in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are streaming, Management Center has free templates and resources for some of this stuff that we're talking about, celebrating internally and organizational resources.
Different types of templates. And
Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah.
One of the things Hannah mentioned was being a people pleaser. That's something I also really suffer for, especially in communications with anybody in my organization or personal life. And so one of the tools, because sometimes when I'm trying to write an email and I know what I want to say, and I know how I want to say it, but I just can't get the words out, I use ChatGPT.
Yes.
To
ChatGPT is a wordsmith.
Yeah, it's a wordsmith, and it removes so much stress in my life because it gives me something that's usually at the first go really, really well written. It is what I need it to be, but if it's not, it's just a matter of giving some additional instructions, tweaking it a little, and the final project, is something that in all reality I could not have produced, but is very very aligned with my goals.
That's awesome. Using ChatGPT to wordsmith your emails and internal communications. Yeah, and you can put in there, you can dump all of your frustrations in ChatGPT, and then you can just type, make this sound nicer, and it will spit it out for you. It sure will. That's great. Yes. Other questions? Anyone want help that you didn't get, like something we didn't cover, or you're sitting there thinking, I should not have come to this after all? When's lunch? Yes.
I have a question. So I'm in a unique role where I'm working a capital campaign, and I'm the only staff member dedicated besides for the chief philanthropy officer, our ED, and then our cabinet. So it can feel kind of isolating at times because although I'm not, a director and have people below me, I feel the pressure on that level. It's a really big campaign, it's two-phased, so finding that mutual as far as, I'm doing a lot of work even though I'm not really managing people below me, it's just a hard dynamic to find where I fit within the organization, as well as, people above recognizing that as well. So, I don't know, what are some tips as far as finding, collaboration with others and not feeling like you're the only one, and you don't want to bring up things that don't pertain to their role, just trying to find advice that isn't your boss that's leading all these other things, marketing, communications, development. It's just a very narrow, focused path.
Yeah, being a capital campaign person and being isolated because nobody else gets it. Yeah, I think that's true of fundraisers in general. Like, a lot of times the rest of our organizations don't understand what we do. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, look for a mentor outside your organization who can help you navigate that, somebody that has been through a capital campaign, because I think that's common. But also internally, I always said every person is a development person, right? Every person at the organization is a development person. And you do have to do some extra internal work to make people think that way. But if it's your program people, what new programs are they going to be able to do as a result of this capital campaign? And I would, be texting them, be like, just close this gift, that's X amount of money towards your program room. Happy Friday. I think doing that kind of stuff that draws that line between, this is why you care about this. And then any kind of, I like to meet with other, people to ask, what stories do you need me to tell in the community, right? If you're the development person, I want to be sure that we're telling our story the right way. Give me your perspective. And then if they tell you, a story or a perspective or something that you use in a donor meeting, then follow back up with them, right? I use that in this donor meeting. Thank you so much. I think the more you do that kind of stuff, the more they're going to view themselves as part of your team. Instead of just let me explain to you my job. How can you bring them in, right? I think that can be helpful. All right, we're 5 minutes over. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, thank you all so much for coming. This is Hannah and I's contact information. Feel free to reach out anytime. It was great to see you all. Thank you for coming to the library. Thank you for those of you that are streaming. And we'll be around for a few minutes if you want to chat. So, thank y'all.